So welcome again, everybody. And with that clip from Beauty and the Beast, just kind of a little way of exemplifying that sometimes you think you know somebody and you discover this whole new side to their personality you didn't know. Sometimes it's not until you say something about a hobby of yours, I don't know, a sport that you do, or golf, or something, and then they say, hey, you do that, I do that too. And this person that maybe you couldn't stand before, or you didn't have the warmest feelings towards, suddenly you have some point in common with them. You discover this whole new side of them. How many people here enjoy sightseeing when they travel? Yeah, so I wasn't a sightseer until we went on our honeymoon. We decided to go to Jerusalem and Israel and that area. Beautiful beaches in Tel Aviv, and in Jerusalem, of course, there's a lot of things to see, and in the region. And honestly, it was great. Now, I'll be very honest with you. I didn't do a lot of research. I didn't read a lot before I went. I was wedding planning, and I was more interested in who I was going with than where I was going. And it was a great trip. We really had a great time. When I got back, all my friends were telling me, hey, I've also been to Jerusalem. Did you see this? Did you go there? This was so amazing. And I felt like I kind of missed out, because there were all these things and all these places that I had never been to and that I had never seen. And it's actually my wife who's turned me into a sightseer. Before that, I was much more of a beach kind of person. Another analogy that we could kind of use is how many people here, when you get like some kind of new device or something, the first thing you do is read the user's manual. Show of hands. Wow, a lot less than the sightseers, right? If you're anything like me, you pull it out of the box, you look for the power button. That's what I'm looking for, right? How do you turn this sucker on and let's see what it can do, right? And then you play around with it and you like it and it's great and so on. And after a while, the novelty wears off and so on. And one day when I'm bored and I have nothing to do, what do I stumble across? The user's manual. And I stumble across the user's manual and I discover, oh my goodness, there were all these other features that I didn't know about, right? But I actually never stopped to look into what is the full potential of this device. So that's kind of what we're here to do tonight, is to just stop, to think, to ask, what is the fullness of our humanity? And oftentimes, when I mess up like a little bit, or I make a little mistake, or this or that, maybe not like some big thing, but something that is easily excusable, I'll say, so somebody will say, oh, like this and this, and you say, well, yeah, I guess so, but I'm only human. And it's almost like being human has become like this lowest common denominator. It's sort of like I'm only human, like I'm not like super I don't have a superhero memory, or I don't see through walls, I can't, et cetera, right? And it's almost an excuse for fault and for mistake. But I guess we have to ask ourselves, is that what we were is that what we're cut out for? Is that what we're made for, right? Is to be just this kind of, fallen or broken kind of reality. And to kind of answer that question, we need to be able to compare to some kind of normal. And in today's society, at least here in Toronto, it's become almost taboo. It's almost politically incorrect to ask what is normal. And and everybody has the right to their own normal. And that's fine if you believe that. That's great. You know what I mean? But it also begs the question: is there some kind of overarching normal, or is there an original normal? Like maybe the new normal that we're at now is different from. But is there some kind of normal that preceded all of this? And some people would say, no, there isn't. You know what I mean? Robert Anton Wilson is a 20th century poet and playwright, American writer and playwright, and he would say that there is no normal. Our normal is just something that none of us are able to ever attain. And here we are looking at like this this pile of puzzle pieces. We're looking at like this pile of puzzle pieces and trying to put them back together again in some kind of orderly fashion without being able to see what the original is. And if you have an unlimited number of puzzle pieces, I've seen these puzzles before. They give you like 1,000 puzzle pieces, and they don't let you know what the picture is, and you have to kind of figure it out. And I have friends who love doing puzzles, and they can figure it out. But if you have like an unlimited number of puzzle pieces, how could you ever figure out what goes where? And a lot of the time, we go through life. I go through life. I'm busy. I got stuff going on. I don't have time to stop and to think and to ask myself these kind of deep, sort of, so to speak, philosophical questions, right? And so we just go from one thing to the next, and I just kind of go from one thing to the next. But Socrates, one of the fathers of philosophy, says an unexamined life is not worth living. If we're not going to stop and ask ourselves, what are we doing? Where are we going? You know, I'm just going to drive as fast as I can for as far as I can go, but not stop and ask myself, but where are we going? And what are we doing? And the trouble with asking that question is that now there's become a whole lot of different isms and ologies out there, right? And all kinds of different, isms that we can follow, whether they be religions or philosophies that have turned into these ologies, right? So new historicism, nihilism, euphemisms, existentialism, expressionism, and so on, right? Marxism, Leninism, and so on, right? Arianism, capitalism, structuralism, Scientology, and so on, right? But if you look around us and if you take a step back and look at society and where kind of things are going, you would almost say that materialism seems to be in the lead. And this isn't the materialism like I want the newest iPhone or a new pair of shoes. This is the materialism that is actually like it's a philosophical materialism. It is, I believe in matter. What I can see, what I can touch, what I can sink my teeth into and put my hands on, that is real, and everything else is not. Now the trouble with that is it leads, on a surface level, that's very easy to accept. But on a deeper level, it really cancels out the potential of God. And if that is indeed true, then all sense of morality and principle and value are canceled out as well. And then, so there is no actual right and wrong, because there's no one to say what is right and what is wrong. There are societally accepted norms, and maybe people who would adhere to this, such as atheists, aren't going to start living immoral, reckless, uncivilized lives, because they would say, and I've had these conversations with many people, that for society to exist there have to be some rules. But those rules are not actually founded on anything. They're arbitrary. It's arbitrary that one will not kill another. And I would tell you, maybe the title of this book is accurate. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. A lot of people, when they go down this road, only go down it for so long, because it leads to a very dark and absurd. It can lead to a very dark and absurd place. So then, I googled like feel good meme, right? And I got this, right? And this is what a lot of the rest of us do, right? Is we just kind of go through life and we don't really know where we're going, but we're just going to go there anyways because it feels good. The trouble with this is that it's very passing, it's very temporary, and it doesn't give, feeling good about things, doesn't give a sense of purpose or sense of direction, or give us a sense that we're building on anything. It's really rooted in the present, with no real view of the future and a disregard for the past. And that is also kind of somewhat distasteful, and no one enjoys having good times forever. Eventually, you feel like you wish you were contributing maybe towards something more. And then people try to figure out, well, how can I be spiritual? So today I Googled, how can I be spiritual, and stuck it on this slide, right? And I got 345 million hits. Amongst them, WikiHow is telling us 3 ways to become more spiritual, and here I found 17 easy things you can do in less than 15 minutes every morning. Now, I don't mean to be facetious, this is totally what came up, number 1, 2, and 3 hits on Google when you Google, how can I be spiritual? And you can't help but wonder, people have devoted their lives throughout the ages of many different cultures and nationalities and different faith backgrounds and worldviews. There's got to be more than 3 ways or 17 easy things you can do in under 15 minutes every morning. There's got to be more. And if you were speaking to somebody else, they would probably be able to share with you what they know, but I can only share with you what I know, the Christian worldview. In the Christian worldview, there is one true God, and only one. And He is the creator of the universe. He creates the universe out of goodness, not out of need or out of some unfulfilled desire, but out of His outpouring goodness, He creates the universe, and He creates all of the known world. And whether you believe the mechanism of His creation to be evolutionary or to simply be an act of will and a word which He speaks is sort of beyond the scope of today. You'll find some stuff written about it on the book table there if that interests you. But He creates the world, and He crowns His creation with humanity. And everything that He creates, He says, this is good. This is good, this is good. And when He comes to creating humanity, He looks and He says, this is very good. And He creates Adam and Eve, humanity as a whole, with the purposes that they would continue to evolve until they become exactly as God Himself, by grace, by His goodness and His love, not by some deed that they do and that they earn. And so they live in this relationship with God. And so humanity lives in this relationship with God. And humanity is created so perfectly that they can love. And part of that love, with that comes choice. And with that comes the choice to trust or not to trust. And with that choice comes the potential and eventually the actuality of some seeds of doubt being planted. Well, maybe God didn't create you like Him because He doesn't want you to be like Him. Maybe and the trust is broken. The trust is broken between humanity and God. And from that moment, things seem a bit out of order. And if God Himself is the source of life that gives life to humanity, then all of a sudden that connection is broken. And while that connection is broken, well, what happens if what gives you life is interrupted, that source of life is interrupted? Well, naturally, one begins to die. Humanity begins to die. But it's not like an immediate death, like what the scriptures say specifically is, by death you shall die. So death becomes a process. And that's how sickness is understood in this worldview. That sickness is the disconnection from the source of life and the eventual outcome of which is death. You know what it's kind of like? You have some devices that you plug in to charge in the wall or something, or an AC adapter for some device, your laptop or whatever, and sometimes they have a little LED indicator light. When you pull it out of the plug, the light doesn't always go off immediately. It just kind of fades out slowly, right? And so humanity begins to fade out of life and eventually enter into death. And something is out of order. You ever been waiting for the bus? One of our volunteers was taking the TTC here, and the subway was down, and so the shuttle buses, and then you're standing there and you're late for a meeting and the bus is coming and you're like, thank God. And as the bus comes, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't say 501 Queen Street. That's and you're like, oh no. And it says, not in service, right? And if you've been sick, I don't wish it upon anybody, or if you've lost a loved one, Something just seems so drastically wrong about that. In my past life, I was a doctor for children, a surgeon for children, and I actually dealt with a lot of death. So I'm not someone who hasn't seen people die. I've seen hundreds of people die. And there's just something so drastically wrong about it. People aren't meant to die. They're meant to live. It's so clear. It's so obvious when you face death in the face. When you lose a loved one, the pain of parting makes it so obvious this person was not supposed to die. No matter if they're young or they're old, it's obvious, and every single time, that's how almost every single person always feels. Something is just not right with this life. Something is broken. And the moment God catches Adam red-handed with the apple, right? A couple of scenes before, God creates Eve for Adam, and Adam sees her for the first time, and he gets down on one knee, and he says to her, "Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh," and he's so romantic. And then when God catches him red-handed with the apple in hand, what does he do? God says to Adam, "Adam, what did you do?" And Adam says, "The woman whom you gave me. I don't know her, I don't know who you're talking about. Well, me, right? I was snoozing away, having an afternoon nap, and suddenly this apple found its way into my hand and into my mouth. I had nothing to do with it, right?" He's basically saying, if somebody's going to get in trouble, it ain't me, right? And the getting in trouble he's talking about is kind of like hell. So he's basically, one moment he's saying, "Bone of my bone, flesh," and then the next moment he's saying, if somebody's going to hell, it ain't me. What happened? So you find that not only does this mistrust, this distrust, this rupture of the relationship with God cause sickness leading to death, it also ruptures relationships, and humanity starts to turn on itself. The term Homo sapiens was coined in 1758, and the word homo comes from hominis, which means human in Latin, and sapiens is discerning, wise, sensible. And the wisdom, the discernment, the sensibility of humanity starts to wither away as that trust is broken. And humanity starts to do weird things. And what we're talking about here is not necessarily, we're not talking about necessarily like complete moral depravity or complete, acts of terror and horror and war crimes. That stuff is included. But what we're talking about here is just being off the mark. Just being off the mark is enough to set this cascade into motion. Let me give you an example. If you get 97 on a math test, most people would be happy with that, other than my parents, right? And you get that, and you'd be pretty satisfied. 97 is pretty good, right? It's an A plus and then some. Well, that's great. How about if you went to your doctor and he told you, "You know what? You're 97% healthy." I think most of us would turn and say, "What's wrong with me?" Right? And if you didn't have a chance to ask, the only question we'd be thinking on our way, walking on our way home, waiting for our next doctor's appointment is, "What's wrong with me?" When it comes to our health, when it comes to our well-being, what we aim for is perfect. What we aim for is to be healthy. And less than that is concerning, right? And we see that from the very next generation after Adam and Eve. Their children, Cain and Abel. Cain is jealous, kills Abel. Humanity is killing itself. Humanity is killing itself. And so Adam is turning on Eve, Cain is turning on Abel. The whole thing is a mess. And it doesn't take a lot of imaginativeness to see that this is exactly what's also happening in society today. Just watch the news for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes, and you'll see humanity self-destructing. And something is wrong with the fact that half the world is starving and the other half doesn't care. There's something wrong in our world, right? And so here we are with our pile of puzzle pieces. And it's nearly impossible with an infinite number of puzzle pieces to get them all together and put them all together. So God says, when we created you, when you were created in the image and likeness of God. And so God says, let me show you what that image is supposed to look like. If you were a carbon copy, let me show you what the original is. And Jesus comes and is born in a manger and lives a normal human life and dies and rises from the dead and eventually ascends to heaven to make that reality real to us and make it clear to us what that really is. In Philip Schaeffer's Peter Schaeffer's Equus, this young man starts worshiping this horse. And the point that this really masterful playwright is making is that inside each one of us there is a desire to worship something. And there's this beautiful line in the play where it says that if you don't worship, you shrink, says the boy. One of the ancient writers of the church says it in similar terms. He says salvation, or different terms, but the same thing. He says salvation is more than forgiveness. It's a genuine renewal of man. Humanity. It's gender neutral. And that's what it means to be fully human, to have the full potential. So what we're after here is not some kind of some moral liberation, but of a healing, of a putting back together, of a restoring or a restoration. And the kind of the universal symbol for that is the rainbow, where God is the one who is restoring us back to our original state, to become fully human and become fully alive. Enjoy your discussions.